The Nissan Z shows how much difference one car can make to a company. First launched in the 1970s, it set hearts racing and caused a stampede. But it died a slow death and disappeared in the 1990s. Its revival signaled that Nissan was once again raring to go. To understand this corporate roller coaster ride, we must go back to the beginning. The Nissan Motor Company started building its small Datsun passenger cars in April 1935. These cars showed the world that Japan was a modern, industrialized nation. The preparation for war shifted the emphasis to military trucks. After the war, the country tried to regroup and find its footing. Nissan's plant was requisitioned by the occupation forces for almost 10 years. Many of its dealers switched allegiances to Toyota. The old order no longer functioned. Nissan would have to move away from tradition. Truck production resumed in 1945 and passenger cars in 1947. But the company was rocked by perpetual labor management strife. To stabilize would require changing how it did business. Nissan executives turned to an American, Edward Deming, whose wartime experience helped him develop statistical control methods for developing low-cost, high-quality manufacturing.
I told the Japanese that they would capture markets within 5 years the world over, that they would take their place alongside prosperous nations. They have done it. They have done it. No one, I was the only man in Japan in 1950 that believed it, but I believed it and I knew it.
Oddly enough, American car makers ignored Deming's help, but Nissan embraced him and started on the path to revival. It helped them take a role in the rapid transformation of the country. The Japanese miracle was underway. Yutaka Katayama was one of the people who would launch Nissan onto the world stage. He had a passion for cars and racing. In 1958, Katayama convinced the company that he should enter 2 Datsuns in the Australian Rally, one of the most grueling races in the world. The cars won their class championship, demonstrating Nissan's rugged engineering.
Nissan is originally an engineering company rather than sales, Rather, sales was a little bit weak in the past. But in the worst day of Nissan, still Nissan was keeping engineering power themselves.
The world recognized Nissan's prowess when it was awarded the Deming Prize for Engineering Excellence. Nissan saw this as a sign that it was ready to export its cars. It was an expensive and risky move, but the only way to grow. It saw a need for small, affordable cars. The cars were an unusual sight in the US. Large cars dominated the roads, but some people were buying Volkswagens and other European cars. Learning to sell cars in the US would require finding someone who understood the Western world. Katayama was given the job of taking Nissan onto the global stage. He'd attended college in the US and had a feeling for what people wanted. He saw that Volkswagens had a certain charm, Mercedes had luxury, Jaguars were sexy, and Porsches were exciting. Nissans were plain. No one thought Katayama's task was easy. In case this global marketing experiment failed, they decided to sell the cars under the Datsun brand and not tarnish the Nissan name. The car's diminutive size wasn't a drawback in other parts of the world. In Europe, a Nissan could easily be mistaken for a Renault, Fiat, or Morris. With higher gas prices, lower wages, narrow roads, a lack of homes with garages, a small car was practical. While its cars looked right at home in Europe, Katayama knew he had to do something to make them sell in America. He educated the engineers about designing and building cars that would tantalize North America and put Datsun on the map. It was a steep learning curve. The cars were becoming increasingly well-engineered, but they were still boring. However, there was a bright spot, the Fairlady 1500. With inspiration from MG, Nissan created a series of sports cars using the sedan chassis. The 1600 and 2000 Roadsters were more reliable than the MGs and Triumphs, but weren't the breakthrough cars Katayama needed. Katayama didn't give up. He still thought a hot sports car was needed to break out of the pack, something to rival the Corvettes, Jaguars and Porsches. He wasn't alone. Some of the engineers and designers shared his passion for sports cars. The company contracted with Albrecht Goetz, a German sports car designer, to help them develop concepts. He was known for styling the 1957 BMW 503 and 507, two roadsters that are considered classics. Many believe that the work he did for Nissan inspired the early designs for what would become the legendary 240Z. Katayama had been promoted to president of Nissan Motors USA. He relentlessly pushed Japan headquarters for his pet sports car project. His pressure resulted in a new design team being formed to develop a sports car for the US market. The effort would be given an internal code name, Nissan Design Project Z, since all the other letters had been used. Goetz had shown the designers how to bring their drawings to life by using modeling clay. This would give them a way to see a concept in 3 dimensions and view it from all angles. Working with their hands, they could feel the curves they wanted in a car. Once the model was done, they started to build prototypes. Katayama wanted the new car to be sleek and modern looking. Like a race car, he made sure it was wind tunnel tested and refined. He was pleased with the shape, but there was more testing to do. Before the car could be mass-produced, it had to go through an exhaustive series of crash tests. Safety was becoming increasingly important in the US. The prototypes were built, disassembled, tested, and refined until the team was sure they were ready to take on the world. Finally, in 1969, it was time to show the public the results of their work. The company unveiled the Fairlady Z at the Tokyo Auto Show. It got the attention of the press and stole the show. Katayama was sure that this was the car that would conquer the world. By October of 1969, it was ready for the United States. This was a car that looked like Z. To become accepted as a world-class sports car, Datsun had to prove the Z could compete. It was entered in the East African Safari Rally. This rugged event would show that the car was more than just another pretty face.
Already more than half the entrants have retired. Datsun number 11 is running the wild plain of Uganda, closing in on a Porsche, the leader, and its 13-point lead.
As the car zoomed toward Nairobi, it became clear it was headed for victory in the Safari Rally. Others saw its racing potential. A team was organized that won numerous races sponsored by the Sports Car Club of America, the SCCA. John Morton was one of the leading drivers.
Also make it an excellent performer in the street. Power, for instance. There's a 2.4-liter overhead cam engine up there, and it really moves out. The handling is special, too, with fully independent rear suspension. And the Datsun has big disc brakes up front. When you're going this fast, I wouldn't have it any other way.
The team won the 1970 and 1971 SCCA C Production Championship and was rewarded with a contract from Nissan to develop a high-performance version of the car. Publicity from racing and glowing reviews catapulted sales. In 1970, 1 year after being introduced, the used Z sold for more than what it was new. American car companies had tended to dismiss the Japanese before the Z hit the market. And the response to the small car invasion from Europe and Japan was lackluster. The little cars from Detroit were surviving on the loyalty of customers who would only buy American. But this was about to change. When OPEC, the Organization for Petroleum Exporting Countries, turned off the tap in 1970, the gas lines formed. People switched to the Japanese car makers' fuel-efficient cars. The 240Z got 20 miles to a gallon, and Datsun's other cars did even better. What buyers found was surprising. Not only did the cars get better mileage than their Detroit steeds, they were better built. They didn't need as many repairs, were more reliable, and often the dealership experience was much better. While most people remained loyal to the homegrown cars in the United States, import sales grew. Nissan and Katayama rode the wave of events. By 1973, sales of the Z car alone had exceeded 115,000. Small Japanese cars were no longer a curiosity. They were showing up everywhere. Young people flocked to the affordable imports, partly out of rebellion against their parents and the cars they drove, and partly because the cars just seemed to be more fun. The Z got a bigger engine in 1974, up to 2.6 litres, and was renamed the 260. Compliance with stricter emission regulations robbed the car of some power. Horsepower fell to 139, but critics greeted the new model with open minds. The press and the public responded to the Z. It set a single-year sales record of over 63,000 cars. But some weren't happy with the power loss. Nissan introduced a more powerful car the next year, with an engine displacement of 2.8 litres. Of course, they called it the 280Z. This car helped Datsun become the top-selling import in the United States in 1975. It was a remarkable achievement that mirrored its growth at home. In 1974, Nissan had claimed 34% of Japanese car sales. This was a company to watch. While sales figures were promising, there were organizational problems that eventually would nearly kill the company. Katayama knew that Nissan dare not become complacent if it were to survive in the increasingly competitive world market. He constantly battled with corporate headquarters for change. His reward was to be summoned home and retired in 1977. Katayama worried that the company was losing its way. It would be a few years before it became clear that he was right. On the surface, things seemed to be fine. The new Z, the 280ZX, was ready to roll out in 1979. It was larger and more luxurious than its predecessors. The new Z was lauded by the motoring press as a real contender that could take on the Corvette and even a Porsche. Sales shot up to over 86,000. It also captured its 10th consecutive SCCA championship. Nissan continued to rack up racing wins.
He's got the jump on it. He's overtaking Newman in turn one. Newman scores.
More changes followed. A turbocharger in 1981 and more racing wins. One of their most recognizable drivers was actor Paul Newman. He'd been racing Zs since 1979. He was more than a hobbyist. He was a serious competitor. He won the SCCA GT1 in 1985 and 86. Nissan loved it. It provided a great marketing boost for the new Z. Its 50th anniversary edition, the 300ZX. The 300ZX was sleeker and had a more powerful 3-litre engine. The normally aspirated engine produced 160 horsepower, while the turbocharger beefed it up to 200. It was the second best-selling Z, but some began to wonder if it should be so luxurious. The doubters were in a minority, and the company kept beefing up the car with more features. In 1990, the styling was enhanced, and the car took on a more aggressive posture. It was given a new double overhead cam, 3-litre engine that boosted normal horsepower to 222 and to 300 with a turbocharger. Once again, Motor Trend named the 300ZX its Import Car of the Year. Automobile Magazine awarded it the Design of the Year. Road and Track called it one of the 10 best cars in the world. It looked like this legend would live forever, but there were growing signs that this high-performance luxury sports car was pricing itself out of its market. Its popularity had been built on affordability. At $45,999, it now cost more than 10 times when first introduced. Sales started to plummet, from nearly 40,000 in 1990 to a little over 4,000 in 1995. The Z car's fortunes mirrored the state of uncertainty at the whole company. Nissan had expanded capacity throughout the world during the 1980s and taken on large debts. But its lackluster cars weren't selling anywhere. Nissan's executives couldn't manage the changes, and things spiraled out of control. One of the casualties was the Z model. The last 300 rolled off the assembly line in 1996. Things continued to get worse for Nissan. It needed help and accepted a $5.4 billion offer from Renault for a 36.8% stake in the company. Renault sent in the Brazilian-born son of Lebanese immigrants, Carlos Ghosn, to oversee its investment. Ghosn had earned the name La Coste Killer during stints as an executive at Michelin and Renault. Theoretically, he was to report to the Nissan chairman, but in fact, he was there to turn things around. He wasn't afraid of change.
Everything we touch, we shift. And everything we shift, we try and do make better. Shift is not just a tagline. It is, in fact, a value that motivates us to stretch, to deliver our very best. It manifests itself in working across functions, companies, borders, and cultures.
Ghosn's plan for a quick return to profit included debt reduction, closing factories, and job losses. But he believed the key to long-term growth was new models. He said, "There's no problem that good products can't solve." He was determined that the company produce innovative new cars that were like those in its heyday during the 1960s and 70s. This was a company that had changed the way people viewed automobile engineering and manufacturing. Of course, he had to resurrect the Z.
One of our goals has been to add an emotional dimension to our products. We knew we had to retain the strength of our serious engineering and expertise and add to it both a visual passion and excitement.
In the new Z, we wanted to create an authentic front-engine rear-wheel drive sports car.
Ghosn hired Shiro Nakamura away from Isuzu and put him in charge of design.
From 240Z, we brought affordability, practicality, and true sense of fun. From the 300ZX, we brought contemporary design and contemporary sports car proportions.
Jerry Hirschberg, former president Nissan Design America, welcomed the new Z with open arms.
We did not want retro, but we did want a kind of fusion of the DNA of both the 240 and the 300ZX. We aimed to capture the kind of feline grace, I've called it, of the 300ZX, along with the kind of long hood, kind of sassy, short deck, kickback stance of the original 240Z. We also wanted to project a strong sense of the car's extraordinary performance, and I have to tell you, it is extraordinary.
When the Nissan 350Z sports car was introduced in August 2002, it signaled that change was underway. It quickly became the best-selling sports car in the United States, selling nearly 40,000 units in its first year. This stylish 287 horsepower car hoped to capture the Z heritage in design, performance, and value. A critical test would come when the father of the original Datsun 240Z, Yutaka Katayama, was introduced to the new model. The company, once again, was interested in his opinions.
In the old days, this was good for the younger people, but now they are growing, the age is going up, and this will fit to the middle-aged people too, or older people. Even myself, I can enjoy it.
The car passed the Katayama test, a critical indicator for the company. This agile-looking sports car delivered more performance and features than the original, but retained a feeling of refined simplicity. The Z wasn't the only energized product to emerge from the Goen Nakamura change machine. Its bread-and-butter sedan, the Altima, earned awards and accolades and racked up growing sales. It became Nissan's best-selling vehicle. Nissan was on a roll, and Goen decided to take on the last bastion of Detroit's power, the full-sized pickup. He unleashed the V8-powered Titan, a massive truck with maximum towing capacity of 9,400 pounds. No one would think Japanese cars were puny ever again. While Nissan sprouted broad shoulders, it didn't forego style. Its sleek Murano stood out among look-alike SUVs. Nissan was profitable again. Goen had delivered the changes he promised and more, including a convertible version of its flagship Z car. Here was a company that was once again on the road. Goen wasn't content to stop there. He had new territories in his sights, like China. He had shattered the old image of Nissan and replaced it with a vibrant new one. The Z car was a vital part of that transformation.
It's very difficult to explain by word or the mouth. So I think experience is the best thing, so try it.
It has been a remarkable journey, from the dreams of its founder to its evolution as a globe-embracing enterprise. Nissan is a company that has repeatedly shown what a difference one man and one car can make.